Hi, and welcome to the 2026 edition of Write Hive in the Write Hive Annual Conference. My name is S. Morgan Burbank, pronouns are they, them, and I am the moderator for this panel talking about transportation in fiction and how awesome trains are. I am going to be very excited about this panel, but that is neither here nor there because I am the one moderating it rather than the one delivering it. And without further ado, I'm going to take a moment to introduce the panelists that we have today that will be discussing our topic. Going down my list, first we have Liam Quane. After gaining experience making short films, writing screenplays, and editing music videos, Liam turned to a different storytelling venture in the form of novels. And after reading 6 of them, he wrote his own in a hectic hail of key presses and dicey guesses. This bullheaded effort morphed into what would later be called Road to Juno, a science fantasy epic that itself became a quarterfinalist in the prestigious SPSFC competition. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today, Liam.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and great introduction. Thank you.
Of course, you wrote it, so you should thank yourself. It'd be funnier that way, anyway. Next, we have Rosemary Jones. Rosemary Jones is the author of the Arkham horror novels, The Arcane Gamble of Harvey Walters, The Nightmare Quest of April May, Mask of Silver, The Deadly Grimoire, and The Bootlegger's Dance. Her other works include Wrecker of Engines Cobalt City, Dungeons and Dragons Forgotten Realms novels, Crypt the Moaning Diamond, and City of Dead. Numerous novellas, short stories, and collaborations. Follow her adventures at rosemaryjones.com. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Next on my list, we have Sean Morrissey Carroll. Sean is a community organizer and climate fiction writer from Houston, Texas. An avid history explorer, former art critic, and restaurant cook, he is happy to bring the world's influence to his writing. Sean is a co-host of weekly Writers' Lunch events, member of Tomeworks Editing Collective, former programming director for Bright Space Writing Center, and has been published in Bullshit Literary, Space City Underground, Defunct Magazine, and Ponfalat for fiction, as well as Gulf Coast Magazine, Artforum, Art America, and the Houston Press for nonfiction. He was nominated for a Penn Dow Award for his story Future Floods of Houston in 2020, and his street stand was named as one of the 10 best restaurants in Houston in 2015. Welcome, Sean.
Hello, happy to be here and wondering how I can fit my list of places I have ridden public transportation into the conversation.
There you go.
We'll find a place, don't worry. Last but not least, we have Patchree Jones. As a girl, Patchree Jones grew up watching Thai dramas with her mom and dreamt of being a playwright. While life took her on a different path, her love of stories never faltered. In fact, she truly believes that it takes a fighter to share one's vision of the world, and Patchree hopes to blaze a trail for all readers to go after their dreams unapologetically. Currently, she has 2 published children's books, Skylight, Book 1, and the Make Light trilogy, and The Elephant of Himapan, an original Thai folklore chapter book. Patchree was recently named a Bookstagram 2025 award finalist for Children's Author of the Year. Her first story in the adult fiction sphere will be published in the upcoming In the Words of a Flower anthology with Ink and Gray. Patchree Jones is a Thai-American author and currently lives in Southern California with her husband, 2 children, and 1 lazy dog. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. So I'm going to start with I think a question that hopefully will be one that is going to get some varied answers. And I say that solely because transportation is a fact that occurs just across so many stories, regardless of genre, regardless of time in which it was written, whatever it may be. I'd like to know from our panelists, what are some great examples of unique transportation that you have seen in stories, whether that be stuff that you personally have read, or that you're culturally aware of, whatever it may be. Let's go with Sean first. He's first on my little screening thing.
I just had an answer and then I completely changed it. So I'm going to go with Nnedi Okorafor in Binti and Traveling by Space Whale.
Ooh, yeah.
Which really, spaceships are trains. You're in the same place. You're moving from place to the other. and there's no divergence unless disaster happens. So I'm a firm believer that all spaceships are trains, but also in this case, in the Binti series, which started off as a few novellas and has been collected, Nnedi Okorafor has her characters travel by a breathing, living space whale as a spaceship.
And I love space whales. I need to say it. I'm gonna get it on a t-shirt. I love space whales. They're in all like my favorite things. Like I'm a big anime and manga fan, so it's kind of a I think it's the origins of that type of storytelling device is Asian myths, I think, because I've seen it in a lot of like, you know, there's video games, but mainly Japanese video games like Death Stranding, and other things like the films of Mamoru Hosoda. He uses them a lot, and there's a new movie out called Scarlet, which is kind of like a Dark Soulsy fantasy style, a dark fantasy style anime film, and because when you're used to the directors using space whales, you see on the horizon the flapping arms in the distance, but then it zooms in closer, and it turns out he's flipped the script and it's a dragon made of swords. But it was nice to have kind of the Asian connection of the space whale being like kind of an introduction, so that it kind of it has a way of storytelling without actually being there, if you know what I mean. Like it relies on the fan's memory, so it takes its place. And I just thought that was like a nice thing to do, and that was the most recent thing I'd seen. So I thought I'd just say that. That's okay.
Primarily, because I write in the middle grade fantasy space, I was thinking that as fantasy writers, and especially for kids, we can just use our imaginations for all sorts of things. Super excited that I have trains in the second book for the Make Like series, but the example that I had was actually one of my critique partners. Her name's Kate DeMouse. So she wrote Fiona and the Forgotten Piano, and she has a chapter where they actually walk through. The main character goes to different worlds. And the first world she walks into is called Electronica. And this is a world where it's high tech, high space, and anything that you can imagine can be turned into a form of transportation. So she's got like students or like little kids on an inchworm school bus that like accordions in and out. And then she's got a baker who has like this two-wheeler bike that can turn into like add a sidecar and has like gravity space so he can put his 15-tier cake on it. They ride in like a roller skate cart in like a big roller coaster to go to a party. And so it's kind of like anything that you can imagine that has wheels and can move or can just kind of hover. That was the most fun scene. So you're almost talking to kids and having kids imagine what kind of trains and planes and spaces they can jump into. And if they can imagine it, as kid writers, we get to make it happen. So that was one of definitely the examples. That was the first example that I would think of. Then I always think of the train systems in the Invisible Library series by Genevieve.
Oh, those are great.
Travel through the rains, all the different realms and the spectrum.
Yeah. I would go because I'm a book collector and I collect illustrated fiction and I like to go back into the history of publishing. I would go with like the first, to me, great speculative train novel is Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, which at the time Verne writes it, which is 1872. It's a possible but never actually done journey. I mean, he reads a newspaper story that speculates that you could do this. And then he realizes they forgot about the meridian. Sorry, it's a spoiler alert, but it's a very old book. So if you don't know the ending,
I think it's okay at this stage.
At this stage, so Verne thinks, oh, that would make a great twist ending, so he has Phileas Fogg going all the way around the world in 80 days by amazingly train, steamship, elephant. There are no balloons in the actual book. Those are all added later for visuals by various movie adaptations. But so it's all very, very possible. And then it inspires in 1889 my absolute favorite trains, steamships journey, which is Nellie Bly, who is a woman who is hired who basically talks Pulitzer into funding her going around the world at 25 years old in 1889. She goes all the way around the world following Phileas's journey to the best extent, stops off in France to shake hands with Jules Verne and ask him how he got the idea for the book, continues around and does it in 72 days. She's actually also racing another woman who's hired by Cosmopolitan, Elizabeth Bisland, who's not as well known, who goes the opposite direction. She doesn't quite make it as fast, but she does it in 76 days. So both women beat the around the world in 80 days record because of trains making the journey possible. And basically the transcontinental in the United States is kind of the key train. So that to me is, start with the great fictional work, go read about those two great women and their train journeys, and then, like me, you may be inspired to take a train or two. I've done the Trans-Siberian from Beijing to Berlin, and it's an amazing journey.
That is very exciting. I have a follow-up train question for you. I'll come back to in a second because it ties in with something I'm going to ask about now. And Liam, I want to start with you on this one. There are a lot of stories that very much use transportation as a way to take character A and move them to location A from location B. And like that, that's just a reality of how we have to operate in the world and therefore an operation of storytelling. However, there are a set number of stories that use the transportation not as a method to move people, but as the storytelling device itself. You think of things like the movie Bullet Train, Cannonball Run, Red Eye, if you really like bad movies, things like that. So Liam, what I want to ask you is there a certain type of a story that sticks out to you, or a certain, maybe story writing method that sticks out to you when it comes to how to make transportation feel more than just, I'm going to go drive to the store right now?
Yeah, there are a number. The one that came to mind first was Snowpiercer, which was the
Yeah.
train was a metaphor for the hierarchical system implemented between classes. So and when it turns corners, like the lower classes can look at the higher classes, and then one of them takes pot shots at the other with their rifle. So it's kind of a lovely moving metaphor on its own. Um, and there's also like I think one of the things that come to mind is a Night on the Galactic Railroad, which is written by Kenji Miyazawa, and it's a children's fantasy story about a train that takes its kids to space. But there's specific like school classes on the train during the story, so that train itself kind of becomes a metaphor for imparting new knowledge into students through teacher-student relationship and that type of making an education exciting and everyone on board, that type of thing. So I think that they're the two I'd take out the air at the moment.
I'm going to go back again. Classics, Murder on the Orient Express. Train lets you trap a whole bunch of strangers together. And if something should happen, like murder, they can't get away from each other until they get to the end of till they get to their destination. And it also allows you then to do, as an author, a lot of weird scenery on the outside if you want to do that. Snowpiercer is an amazing movie. Another one I like is from the 30s. It's another murder mystery called The Great Black Cannibal, which is about a train crossing Australia. And the heroine wakes up on the train, has no memory of how she got there. She puts on her clothes and her shoes don't fit. And she realizes that the clothes she's taking out of the suitcase and putting on may not be hers. She may not be the person who's supposed to be in that train compartment. And it's a great setup. And you can go, and then she's kind of got to sleuth her way through what's going on. So there's a lot of things you can do with a train. Because as I said, I've been on like kind of one of those monumental train journeys from Beijing to Berlin. It's 7 days. And although you can move up and down the train, you can't really get away from people. You are sort of with the same little group of people for the whole time. And it's also very disorienting, I found, as you travel across multiple time zones. you sort of lose track of where you are in space and time. So you can have a lot of fun with that as an author.
Yeah, and you develop the habit of moving sideways down
Yes.
through between the seats.
Yes, yes.
I'll throw it out there. I love in the Dungeon Crawlers Carroll series, which I'm way into right now, the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, which is the third book in the series, and all takes place in a subterranean, absolutely useless, very messy train system. And that becomes where they're going. It is so interesting that right in the beginning of the book, it says you do not need to pay attention to the colors of the trains, the numbers of the different trains. You will get confused. And it's not supposed to make sense. Like, I love it that it's this, like, just absolutely overgrown dystopian. Are you getting from 32 to Aqua? Are you getting from the third station to the 75th? And it's all just a crazy mix of things. But most of it, takes place in trains and uses it as plot devices. It's a great overgrowth of the usefulness of trains.
My only addition is as I'm listening to everybody, and I love adaptation. So anything that if I read it in a book and then I watch it in the movies, I keep thinking of the Hunger Games. And I'm thinking of the trains traveling from district to district and how we can use that as a device to not only for that physical movement, but ways to interact with those different sceneries and the different locations and the locales that we're going through. And then that, just seeing the progression of here we are all the way in the 12th district where everything is so cheap and deadly and dust. And as it gets progressively closer to the capital, you're going in this linear fashion that this world is so small, but you can still travel on this train quite quickly. And then you see just the disparity between the world as a way of looking out those windows and how it zooms by. Like that, or like the Zootopia train scene.
I was waiting for someone to bring that up.
Yeah, I love the Zootopia. Yeah.
Like that was like the last of it. So again, my world, my mindset lives in kid world. That's where I have it. But like those seem like examples where again, it's that a way to be able to view the societies that we're in and that transition, like literal physical transition, taking you through on that ride.
Well, Patchree, I want to stick with you because of a book you brought up a few minutes ago in a previous question, that being Fiona and the Forgotten Piano, which I just read with my oldest child. And independent of the book itself, one thing that I personally got from the world you described is big magic school bus vibes.
Yes.
So let's talk about magical properties in transportation. Do you prefer when stories use transportation in a more literal sense, or where they say rules are stupid and I don't want to learn physics?
I would have to defer to the second, because as a fantasy writer, whenever we can't think of a logical way to make stuff work, we just say it's magic, and it's a good tool and technique to be able to do it. Yeah, I love Kate. Kate, as she's a critique partner, so we meet every month. And I'd love to see seeing that story grow. So that we definitely kind of share each other's opinions and philosophies on that. But I'm definitely of the if I can't make it work logically, let me magic the system. And so in the follow-up, so Skylight, which is over here, it's a cloud-based kingdom. So it's a kingdom in a realm in the sky. But the second book is taking place underwater in an underwater realm. So I actually utilize trains because I always incorporate Thai words into it. And our train is actually just like a glass elevator train car, and they travel by a serpent. So the sea serpent, the Grand Naga, is like the water dragon, ends up swallowing the train car, and they will swim their way through the realms into it, which logically shouldn't work anywhere. But how do you have trains and transportation in a water system? So dealing with that, you have to kind of magic your solution through a lot of things. And I think that's the fun part of writing for kids, that as long as you can imagine it and make it sound somewhat logical, then kids are like, okay, that works, that tracks.
I've seen SpongeBob.
Yes.
They have cars underwater.
Yeah.
It makes total sense.
It's all underwater. So how do we travel and how do we use that? But I definitely love the use of transportation more than just moving the characters places and places, and from space to space, but how it is that that transportation can be an indication of a whole lot of other hidden things, either class stratification, right? We don't always all have fancy cars, or we don't get to sit in the fancy train cars, and however those issues that you see in reality, you get to kind of infuse them into the underlying story. You're not slamming it over the head in kids cases, but being able to craft that in there and weave those kind of realities into it. You have real life things, but with a flair of magic. I always kind of love magical properties and magical cars that can whisk us away. I keep thinking of Howl's Moving Castle. It's my favorite movie. So it's like, however, that big hunk of junk wants to fly, walk around and eventually flies at the end.
Moving castle just does.
Yeah.
Well, and the other fun thing is it can be really, transportation can be transformational for a society. I mean, in the real world, trains all of a sudden made mobility much more possible. Steam made much more, and Terry Pratchett does one of his, it's not his last or close to his last novel, Steam, talks about, it takes his own love of trains, which is very obvious, and brings steam technology to Discworld. And how is that going to then reverberate through Discworld? And how is that going to change this magical fantasy universe? And one of the things I always really loved about whenever he did go into this, whether it was the postal system or printing or in Steam with trains, he really thought hard about how those technologies had changed society in England, and he didn't just sort of flips this over to Discworld, and then it's goblins and orcs and all these other creatures. But it also makes the world more egalitarian, and he keeps talking about that, and that's I think something that we talked about, like you can show the class differences, but you can also use it as all of a sudden people have trains, and now they can move around and now maybe they can't be restricted by the feudal order overlord, or maybe kings and queens don't work so well anymore. And then that gives you another place to spin a story off of. And I love seeing that when people do that with the trains.
For sure. And first off, want to shout out who's going to watch this. Be looking at the schedule of Right Hive, and shout out to all the neurodivergents who are like, I like trains. I'm going to watch this. Absolutely. Because
we are getting there. Don't worry.
A certain type who loves trains, and we're here for you. Absolutely. In terms of weird ones, I love Mobius, going to Liam's things, of loving comics and stuff, and the pterodon that Arzak rides on, but also he just has dozens of strange transportation systems throughout his comics that are amazing. And the Quantum Thief, and the moving city on Mars, that just kind of crawls along. As well as there's another one on Mercury, but one way or another, like a train that moves forward as a city on Mercury, following the only place where it's habitable in terms of temperature, not freezing cold, not burning hot, and has to just circumnavigate again and again. But I love the points that y'all made about the egalitarianism of it. And I think Terraformers, by Annalee Newitz, is a great example of that, where it's about terraforming a planet and creating a new society. But there are so many times in it when they're making a decision and they're like, okay, are we going to have a highway here? No, let's have trains. And those moments when you're in a train and you get the macro micro, like concentration. Things aren't changing around you, so you notice that there's a little tag in a corner, or you notice that a suitcase is out of place or something, and that's very different than having to keep your concentration on a road. You're concentrating on large things. In a train, or in this situation where you don't have to worry about all sorts of other things that you normally do, walking on a cracked sidewalk, are you going to fall over? That a train gives you the chance to notice little things, and I love that.
Yeah, if I may add to that, a lot of the stories that have been named seem to use trains as kind of a key to kind of unlock the world of the story for the reader. But I think that's nicely reflective of real life too, because the way people are kind of viewing the future of the world and how geopolitics is going and the way, other countries have a relationship with each other. I notice the countries that are climbing are the ones who are building new trains, and the ones that are falling are the ones who aren't sorting out the infrastructure that they've laid already. And I'm lucky I wouldn't be a leader because I'd be a tyrant. I'd be like ripping up houses just to like put the veins of the trains through the country, because it does seem to be kind of a foundation that's a necessity for maybe like modern human happiness. I think a lot of people have got a lot of investment in this type of mode of transportation more than cars, because cars are seen as, even though they're, quite universal in a way, they're individualistic. So you kind of cut yourself off from everyone. It's smaller package. You get, it comes at road rage. If your insurance is needed, if you crash, it's your fault. So there's this kind of like anti-Uberization of like a mode of transport, if that makes sense. Like where instead of everything being atomized, it's like a collectivism type, almost like, but like a physical manifestation of collectivism. And I do believe a lot of stories go with this mode of transport mainly as an intro, because it kind of the writers know there is um a lot of people reading, not just an individual, and it kind of helps support the community aspect of books as well, in my opinion, because you kind of, if you go on a train and that's the first thing you're introduced with, you're never alone really in your head. So it's kind of like you have a subconscious connection to other readers, which maybe that's not what a lot of people are going for, but that's what I take from it whenever I see a story like, West Wales that opens up with a train that goes into the special theme park that specifically cuts everyone else out the picture on purpose. And that is the exact opposite of what I was talking about, but that was the point they were making, where they very specifically had the train car completely empty, and the only thing there was a robot to greet you as you enter the story. And I do believe that was to undo what I was just talking about with the collectivism part. Um, so yeah, I just it's a very useful tool, both in and out of fiction.
Rosemary, I want to come back to you for a second. What is something that you would like to see more within stories, be it within your own genre, with it just as a reader, whatever it may be, in terms of how transportation is used? You talked about, having transportation develop the story. And train rides can be boring. Are you advocating for more fights on top of trains?
Oh yeah, no, there can never be two little fights on tops of trains, and it's absolutely hysterical how many books, particularly movies, go to the fight on the top of the train, and it's um, physically it would be very, very difficult. And I know Jackie Chan managed it, and he did it his own stunts, but I'm always just amazed because I would fall off. I have no coordination. And the best spoof I ever saw of that is if you ever get a chance to see the um, stage version of 39 Steps, which is basically done with two or three actors acting out the whole movie. They spoof the whole train fight thing beautifully. So you have opportunities to be both serious and funny with trains. It's a confined moving space, and you can use it however you want it. But I think the other thing, to be thinking about from a standpoint, I write with Arkham Horror. It's historical fiction. I mean, it's set very firmly in the 1920s. There's tentacles and things coming out of the woodwork, but the technology is the 1920s, and I was trying to be very careful about that. And my first three Arkham Horror books all dealt with sort of different aspects of technology: silent movies, flight, because it just comes in toward the end of the 1920s, and radio. Trains are already an established technology in the 1920s. They go back to the 19th century, and they're the main way to get across the country. You're not going to even, 1920s, 100 years ago, you were not going to get in a car and drive across the country. That was extremely difficult to do. There wasn't really a road system to support that. If you were going to move your movie crew, and I had to do that from Hollywood to Arkham, you were going to stick them on a train, and these people are going to have to be together for a week, approximately, and learn how to work with each other before you actually got to your destination. And it's a time thing too. I think when you're writing, we're used to almost instantaneous transportation these days. I mean, we can get on a plane and we can fly around the world in a matter of hours, as opposed to going around the world in 80 days. And stop and slow that down and think, okay, what does it mean if I can't have instantaneous communication with another character, if I can't have instantaneous arrival, if I've got to sit there on the train and worry about what I'm going to find when I get there, there's a lot of opportunities there for development. But again, the technology itself is also very, very cool. And as a couple of people mentioned, there's a lot of people who are really, really crazy about trains. So if you're going to be writing historical fiction, I can tell you, you can go on YouTube and you can find pretty much almost any style of train, from steam trains to diesel to electric. Somebody's done videos of them and it'll explain in depth how these puppies work. So if you want to move into the tech, you can do that too as a background of the story, and it's really fun.
What's that train that is like kind of the Art Deco 1920s concept design that's in like, Brad Bird Pixar films. There's a very specific train. It's got like this sleek shell at the front of it, and
Mm.
that's one of the ones that it was a concept in the what is it, early 20th, yeah, early 20th century.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, that one, and I can't remember the name of it, but the fact that we haven't made one of them now I think, a great sin, and whoever, is in charge of making those decisions need to resign immediately if they're not dead already. Um, uh, but can is there anything like do you know like the absence of a train in a story? Like, is there anything there like for anybody where like the absence of a transport gives a message off itself? Um, because I come from a town which is it's a small working class town in the UK, and it's the only town in the area that has no train station at all. Every other town around us has a train station, and we've never had one before. And that inspired me to use that type of absence in my debut novel, if I may just bring it up for a second.
Yeah.
Um, it's called Road to Juno, and it starts after World War Three, but it was a non-nuclear World War Three, fantasy, magic, that type of stuff. So it's set in New York that's being rebuilt, and the main character always seems to be trying to get a train and can't, even though it's there. They're still building it, and they're building the station throughout the entire story. And this isn't a spoiler, it's only by the end that it's had to magically appear, because if it doesn't, the story can't end. So it kind of takes on a life of its own aggressively. And I don't know whether anyone's ever seen like, you know, a type of the opposite of travel where it's like anti-travel. Like it is, because I know there are examples out there. I'm just whether or not it's like three quarters way moment of a story about, like a good, well, Orient Express, as you mentioned before. Like I have not read the book, unfortunately, because I've got the attention span of a gnat, but I have seen the movie, and the train does get slightly derailed, doesn't it? Doesn't there an avalanche that cuts the
Uh,
travel off?
the most recent version, yes. So
Yeah,
yeah,
is that so? Yeah, so I
I think
was
that
wondering
is for the
if
movie, but yeah,
yeah, I was
but then
gonna
you can
say
do all these because trains are very vulnerable. I mean, if the
yeah,
and if you're doing a war novel, you can blow up the tracks because goodness knows First World War and Second World War, they were blowing up the tracks to stop the transport of troops. That's what your saboteur does, and maybe you're a spy and you're trying, and you go back to the Civil War and you're doing all these things and you've got all these other complications you can because trains are very vulnerable, which is my one thing about Snowpiercer. I'm like, that thing would have derailed a decade ago. I do not think it can go around the world that many times because
No.
they're just too vulnerable form of transportation in some ways because they're stuck on the rail. They can't go off the rails. There's got to be a rail there. There might be an invention that allows you to have a train without a rail in Space Whale, but if you look at that, and also I think it says a lot about where this because of what way we think about trains. There's a lot. I was thinking Peach's example of Hunger Games is great. This is supposed to be kind of a post-apocalyptic future world, and they're using trains, and that's kind of like they have stepped. That kind of is signaling to you they've almost lost some technology, or they've stepped back a bit, or maybe not.
Agree with
I
that.
got to
Yeah,
contend on that because everything evolves into crabs. Just
Yeah,
because
Crab train.
trains are in the
yeah,
future doesn't mean it isn't the friggin' best. I
yeah.
mean, to step in here, but also I think that I have a point about
Oh,
things
I
that you
think
guys
that's
have
good.
just said. There's not as much romance about buses. I was writing a list of like, oh, what are the things that I love about trains? Directionality. It has a schedule. You have a mundanity to it. You're alone in public. You have limited choices, and that makes your life easier to have limited choices. That macro micro attention. And I was like, wait a minute. All of these have, an analog in a bus, and a bus is great too. I like it two-thirds as well. But the only thing that felt like it was something that is an attribute of a train that is not of a bus was no to few impediments. You still have to deal with traffic. You still have to deal with, gas and stuff like that. On a bus. So a train is very simple. In terms of getting to a place, but it's interesting that we have all this. We have an entire talk about trains, and yet it is so similar to buses. To go to the idea of there's a town with no trains, my first thought was, well, you guys had a bus and you hated it. But like that train feels important, like it's a different thing to have it on tracks and be like, this is us staking a claim and saying this is exactly what we're gonna do.
Yeah. Hey, I live in a city. I live in Seattle where we just got a train from Seattle to Bellevue going across the floating bridge. Now we've had buses going across the floating bridge for a long, long time and cars, et cetera, et cetera. So, but this train just opened this year and it was like, oh, you could take a train to Bellevue
In
and
Seattle,
back
I love
again.
taking ferries. In
Yeah.
Baltimore, I
We
love
have
taking
ferries,
a
which are like
ferry.
really cool.
Like
Yeah.
that's the equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to jump in, it's this. If you think of the bus train parallels, I'm an anime watcher and manga reader as well. So there's always every series that it's that mundane, right? Where everything can happen on the train. There's always got to be the one episode where all the kids are jumping in the train to go to the beach, or the scenes where it's crowded, and then the rom-com moment, and it's that moment where the guy and the girl, or the two guys, or whoever their love interests are, you and your love interest, you're so close in proximity, and you either have the moment where we're touching each other and you're protecting them from others, or they're shielding things, because you are in this public space but still living your very private life. So that feels very cultural. And where I'm in LA, so yes, we have our subway system or the metro system, but if I would don't have to get on that, I would rather drive myself and not have to go anywhere. But I think back of traveling to Thailand. It's been over 30 years since I was in Thailand, but we had to travel by train from Bangkok, which is in central Thailand, to southern Thailand, where my dad's side of the family is. And it's like a 14-hour train ride. And you're just stuck. And it's such an everyday part of the culture where, yeah, we're going to hop on the train and that's what you're supposed to do. Now they can fly down there, but not everybody can afford to fly. So you're still going to get those train tickets. But that interaction where we're all stuck in this, and that scene where you have all the sardines in a can in a train car, all the people pushing each other out. When you get to certain stations, the vendors coming in, hawking goods, selling food, and it's just like this lively kind of party where it feels very, it's inherent within the culture of whatever the story is. So I think trains serve that point where you get to put everybody in that moment. But if you're not in a town or a city where that is even a possibility, you're at least exposed to it. But it makes me think of the all the rom-com scenes where we're meeting on the trains, or like two trains crossing, right? Like ships sailing by the night. We always see the one lead character and their face in the window with their headphones on, and then the other two characters who are going to meet later on, like passing in their routes. And so that moment of passing and missing each other, but it feels very cultural.
So
Like Your Name.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
sorry, sorry.
No, you go
There's
ahead.
the movie Your Name that has like
Yes.
such a good use of trains, and that
Yeah.
I can't talk about it too much because I will start crying. I love that's my favorite
Yes.
film. I adore it, and
Yeah.
it's got the mythical red ribbon of connection between two lovers, and the train itself is used as kind of a real material world representation of that connection being split because the two trains pass each other, and but because they're still connected on the rail, that's kind of the destiny part that's linked to it. I love that so much.
Yeah.
In Cleveland, we do not have trains; we have depression. Moving to Sean, we do have the Amtrak, but no
Yeah,
one.
I was gonna say you do a train.
We do technically have the Amtrak, but it's not as popularly used. Anyway, Sean, I want to come to you. We mentioned something that leads me to ask a question for you. So, if you look at the world of transportation and media, you have entities like Thomas the Tank Engine, Cat Bus from My Neighbor Totoro, Lightning McQueen from Cars. What are your thoughts on sentient transportation?
So, one shout out to, if you're in Cleveland or anywhere else and you don't ever take the train, but you know that it's there, try once. Like maybe you need to go to Detroit or something. Just check out the schedule, see if that works.
They leave
I took
Ohio, I
one.
won't come back.
I took one from Houston to New Orleans. The drive is 6.5 hours. You're always stuck in a traffic jam in the middle of a swamp, and the train is 9 hours. And we sat there, and it was chill, and we had Wi-Fi, and you could, bring sandwiches and stuff like that right on the train. But just to, like push it up a little bit. Other than that, sentient transportation, very fun. But as mentioned, there are a lot of fights on trains, and there are a lot of trains getting blown up. So in terms of media, you would have to deal with, your sentient train, possibly suffering some damage or getting hurt. Bullet Train was mentioned. Way
love that.
before the Fast and the Furious was around, both James Bond films and Mission Impossible films feature an incredible amount of train fights for sure. So if any of these were sentient in these, then that's difficult. So I'm going to advocate for no sentient train.
All I can think of is Thomas the Train Engine and Diesel from the same show in a knife fight now.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. I mean, that would be sort of fun. Like if you had a sentient train, and like all sentient beings, it probably will try to protect itself. So if you're starting fights on it, like what is it going to do to calm you down, get rid of you, dump you out? Yeah. There's a lot of
There's no
possibilities.
prime directive in
Yeah.
biological beings.
Yeah. So no, I think you could have a lot of fun with
Thomas the
that.
Tank Engine scares me. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. It frightens me.
Yeah, of all the
I,
sentient
I,
trains, yes.
I think it's because it was like a British show. It's closer to me, so I can feel it watching over my shoulder. But I I remember when I was like a kid, when I was like 2 or 3, they had a ghost train episode, and that was the first time they'd the friendly faces ended up being like evolve into something weirder. And even though it was Thomas the Tank Engine, it scared me like swear wordless. It was terrifying. But that was kind of I did there's with anthropomorphic style transportation. There's it's quite like a rare thing now. I think I'm not sure whether I'm just is it rare for this trope to kind of be brought into modern storytelling now? I don't know why. It seems like because I was trying to pull like Joe the Orient, not the Orient Express. I've nearly said that again. Joe, like there's some stories where that type of thing seems to be missing, even though it's like the world's built to. It should house a sentient train or a sentient vehicle. It doesn't. Like the Polar Express. I'd say I'm really surprised that that train isn't sentient for the type of film it is, and that is almost the way stories have kind of become slightly colder now in terms of, especially like some kids' stories that are doing well, but like films, especially like cinema, it's got this like um realism that's kind of divorced like the magic of, you know, items having souls from like our storytelling in the modern day. I think anyway. Like you know, we had Thomas the Tank Engine, but now you know, isn't the most popular kids show? Well, one of them is. It's kind of like Paw Patrol, so it's like very similar shows. They have, you know, a sentient creature you follow instead of a train, and the, you know, the very similar writing, except, you know, everyone's got the directive, that type of thing, but it's still like a step away from the more fantasy element. It's more grounded, even though there is no, you know, no such thing as a talking dog, unfortunately. It's still closer to reality than, let's say, the cat bus from the what is it called? Totoro, and
Yes.
Lightning McQueen. Like even Cars stopped at like three movies, like the Cars series, and people are waiting for like another one, but people are now suggesting a live action remake with a driver instead, and that's kind of a step away again from the sentient vehicle. So I'm not sure whether that or not that's a trend.
Yeah.
I could just be talking crazy talk. I don't know. Ooh.
That is
Oh,
a wild sentence.
yeah.
I'm still back on there was a ghost episode of Thomas the Tank.
Yeah,
I've got to go look
yeah,
for
yeah.
that.
When
Oh,
you
that would have freaked me out when I was very small.
Patchree, you
when
were
you're
saying
thinking of those
something?
sentient beings, or sentient forms of transportation, I was thinking I had to look it up. So it's the Lunar Chronicles, where it's like this fairy tale retelling. So the first one is Cinder, so it's a retelling on Cinder, the Cinderella story.
Yeah.
One
I've
of the
forgotten her
characters,
episode name.
she becomes she's like an not a I don't want to say AI because but she is where it's her whoever her sidekick is, and I read it years ago, but she becomes like she carries their personality like in a chip, and she becomes their not their train but their airplane or whatever craft they end of their spaceship that they end up kind of traveling through the different series where you have that sentience. So when you're thinking of her getting injured, I think the reason she gets transferred into those different modes of transportation is because she is injured, and so you can find the right form. It also feels very like altered carbon, where, you know, if you have to live forever and your personality gets put, if you have the money, and the rich can put their personalities on a chip, or prisoners can put their personalities on a chip, and it's just like taking your chip and disc and like moving you into different forms. Where when you have to think of the sentience of this inanimate object, of this train, you know, it makes me think of Transformers. It's like Bumblebee. Who do you care for, and how do you deal with these particular objects? And now you have to sit and think: do the objects have feelings? Do the robots have feelings? And it gets you into a whole nother realm of things. But, you know, it'd be cool to have it, right? Like the Knight Rider car.
Yeah.
Back in the day. But if you have that sense of sentience, that now you're opening up a whole nother can of worms of, yeah. I kept thinking of you blowing up all these trains, and it's like, oh my God, I'm so sad that the train.
Yeah, no, that would be like, well, it'd be like, you know, like if you owned Kit, the Knight Rider car, would you
Yeah,
send Kit to the junkyard?
yeah.
You know,
But
like,
for
oh
the
my gosh,
audience,
it's
Or would
Kit.
you hold a funeral? Absolutely.
Yeah,
yeah.
no,
On.
that's that
See,
now
my brain went the
now
whole Chuck Tingle route and ask other questions, but that's neither here nor there.
yeah.
Liam, I want to come back to something you said there that we kind of moved on from. That was interesting in that, and I know this is not the only example of it, but I think it's a very interesting example you used, how Thomas the Tank Engine and Paw Patrol are functionally the same show, just told in, you know, via various different creatures that are sentient. Yeah. how can a author use transportation to subvert genre expectations within their own story?
That's a good question.
Thank you. That's why I'm asking them.
I've at the moment I've not actually tried doing that. That's an interesting thing to do because the kind of a lot of it depends on like the job of the transportation within the story. So um like for example, in the Alien series, the main thing an escape pod is used for is to kill the alien and get rid of it, or like it's not really used to escape. Which I know escape pod's not exactly a mode of transport on its own, but you know it's fancy, it's sci-fi. So whenever a escape pod is brought up, it's always like an evacuation point to kill rather than to save or to rescue. And that's one of the only examples I can think of that type of thing because there's you know, what you're talking about Transformers, that is I nearly jumped off my chair when you mentioned that because I absolutely adore it, and I can't believe I haven't mentioned it since the show started. I'm a fool. Um, but Transformers itself does subvert the way, you know, storytelling's supposed to go by eliminating like the driver entirely. Like it eliminates the character of, you know, the driver, anybody who can operate these vehicles, they have sentience. So that kind of the way that subverts the story is it makes it not human in a way, and even it goes even further by obviously having a connection to like an extraterrestrial war. So it's like, you know, it's like it's saying the war is so dangerous that you have to eliminate the human component from the story in order to get that far ahead. And you can introduce little, you know, the human introduction character, the one who shows the Transformers around the planet, like, you know, Spike and Sparkplug, but they're kept to a minimum. And I do believe that type of subversion is kind of the story itself. Like you can't go away from that when you find out like that's what it's about, you know, robots that turn into cars, it kind of does all the heavy lifting for itself. So they're the examples I can think of, but I can't think of any more, especially modern examples.
Mm,
I keep thinking of mechas, and if you've read Iron Widow, those your out. I heard
yeah.
the whole time I've read it, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but I never understood why it was sci-fi until I finished the book. But just the use of mechas and how now all of a sudden you have to take into account how those operate and how these pilots can create these mechas and that interdependence between the driver and the machine. You use that sense of transportation. It's still a form of transportation, but it's still a very elitist form of because not everybody can be a pilot. Not that you want to be a pilot, but you have those moments where you have to take into consideration that connection. I know I'm like frozen there. Hopefully my speech kept going. But yes, you sit there and it's that relationship between the driver and the sentient being, right? So the mecha, using that form of transportation of, you know, people build connections to their cars, and I don't know, maybe train conductors build a connection to their trains as well. That you kind of sense that relationship there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think again, it's just trains, you're stuck on a track. You're going in a particular way with other forms of transportation. You can divert a little more easily, so that's something to be thinking about as a writer. You know, the train is not going to be easy to make it change course. Whereas with a ship, a plane, a spaceship, anything else, you can change course. But your train, if you get on it at point A, it's going to take you to point B. Now, whether or not you choose to get off at point B or you stay on it to go on to somewhere else, that's, you know, that's some agency you can have, but you you can't avoid the schedule. I thought Chad was really right. It's a schedule. It's gonna leave you at a particular place. possibly not at the time you expected, because I've been on lots of trains that didn't make it where they were supposed to go at the time you expected. Um, but eventually you will get to that particular place. And if it's a place you want to be, great. If it's a place you're dreading going, you can't avoid it. So there's all those kind of options you can have to get back to trains, and they're kind of cool. But as far as sanity and transportation, my heart still belongs to Pilot and Moira in Farscape. They are the greatest sentient transportation team. So that's where I go for that one.
I'll throw it out there about the sentience and the subversion of it. The Culture series by Ian Banks.
Oh, that's
My
great. Yeah.
far future. My the idea of AI has completely surpassed anything that humans need to do. They keep humans around because we're lovely and we're hilarious. My in this case, they're not only the robots, like things walking around interacting with humans, but also the transportation modes and spaceships and giant things as well. And I love how he anthropomorphizes that. My and putting the different personality types of, like, are you a generation ship that has existed for 50,000 years and has a huge, massive memory and things that you have thought of over all this time, creating a very philosophical my character in that respect. Or my the transportation going from planet to planet feels very similar to, as somebody brought up, the Hunger Games. And you're taking a train and you're going from one place to another. Rosemary, totally respect that a spaceship can change course, but it is almost as hard as a train once
It
you are
is, yeah.
set on the way that you're going. The thermodynamics of it are going to be very interesting unless you're like, let's veer 1 degree to one side or the other.
Hmm.
But my the Culture series by Ian Banks, and the subversion of it, because we're coming into a space now of being able to talk about what the future is going to look like, or a fantastic version that reflects on our near future, that should perhaps include much more of this sentience to everyday objects, and that can include transportation as well. I think that there's two modes to that in the sentience. There's the one of a steed, and we have always anthropomorphized horses, etc. And so
Hmm.
that's a lot more prevalent out there. Anthropomorphizing mass transportation, a bit different. And Rosemary, I love your point about, hey, you have your own self to look after. The When you're transporting a whole bunch of people versus one, I the good of the greater versus the good of the individual is very different, and that's a philosophical difference.
Hmm.
I've just remembered I have done the subversion in the next my next book. Um, I can't believe I didn't even think of that. My next book is called Little Height Lies, and it's a giant monster attacks a small town, and a couple has to reunite. It's inspired by Your Name, as we mentioned before, and it's set in America. And one of the two main characters, the couple, the guy is an idiot. That's his problem, and that like haunts the story. That's the thing that kind of keeps him in where he is. But the girl, she is in a wheelchair, and she is confined to a trailer, and she's got trauma. She doesn't like to leave the house, and she has to go rescue him from the monster. And the town is up on top of a really huge hill, kind of like San Francisco style gradient, but it's a really small town. It's just built on top of it like a cone. And in order to subvert the expectations of it, it's the um, main character in the wheelchair and her neighbor going to rescue them, but the neighbor can't drive and she can't reach the pedals. So in order to not kind of it's not just to get some comedy out the scene, it is genuinely a point to illustrate how hard it would be for it, how much of a life change it is getting, becoming paralyzed. Um, the character in the wheelchair has to go on the floor. Sorry, has to go on top of the chair and steer, and the character who can't drive has to go and work the pedals. So they essentially makes, as they call it, a Frankenstein's monster truck, and they both driving at the same time. And that subversion was done in order to kind of, as I said earlier, illustrate just how much extra work a disability brings to you. But it's also done to bring some levity because, you know, the characters are very stern, proud character. So she wishes her husband a swift death before he can see what she's become. So as the driver, and she's saying, I really hope he's dead. I hope he doesn't see me like this. And does that count as subversion?
I do want to go on to one of our final two questions. And Rosemary, I want to start with you because of something you said about part of the appeal to trains is you are stuck on the track from point A to point B, and where you get off is your agency. It is the lone agency you have. There are very few other forms of transportation like that. However, there is one I can think of that I don't think have talked about. That being teleportation as depicted in Star Trek, where you are very much going from one place to another. You are not really in control of it. Does the instantaneous nature of something like, teleportation, transportation, in that way, does that take away the importance of transportation said stories, or is the teleportation beams in Star Trek a closer analog to trains than a car?
Oh, that's a good question. It's kind of, I always thought of teleportation as sort of an elevator. Like it's like one of those quick things that gets you from one point to another point, but not moving around too much. And it was interesting to see how they played with teleportation. Like it could go wrong. They did kind of get into that. And other people could it was a sort of, I was always with Bones on this one. It's a sort of a spooky process because you're basically allowing them to atomize you and then reassemble you, and you're kind of hoping they put you back together again. But they've gotten very blasé about it because they're used to it. And I think, similar to flying. You go up in the tin can and you assume the tin can is not going to fall out of the sky until you get to wherever you're going. So there's that. So I guess, yeah, there's things you could do with it. But yeah, I guess it depends on how broad teleportation is, and it doesn't have to be from. Star Trek was very precise. It was like it's going to get you down to that precise point and drop you there. And if you get into magic systems where people are doing teleportation, go back to D&D. Some of them are precise, dimension door, etc. Is kind of precise. Some of them are broader. You're going to step through that portal and not know where you're going to land. And so you can go all different directions with it. But we'd have to do a whole panel on portal fantasies.
Anyone have any thought they want to add on that one?
Yeah, has anybody seen this? Has anybody read the Jumper series? Because that's my favorite type of teleportation because it's organic. It's not induced by a machine or whatever. But what I like about that type of teleportation is it kind of has a visceral effect when the physics comes into play and the characters land. It always lands with a harsh impact to the world around it, and it's a series about a group of teleporters getting chased by a group of religious. I'm not going to call them nut bars, but yeah, all right, nut bars,
Yeah.
and they're they are trying to kill every jumper to stop them jumping, and the thing that connects them to the motivation behind the villains was one of those kind of life-changing bits of reading because it adds so much depth every time a jumper jumps or teleports. They leave something called a jump scar that erodes the atmosphere. So they are technically creating the end of the world slowly whenever they're jumping. So that really does a good job of splitting your allegiances, and that has a lot of that. In order to explain it to the audience, that has a lot of trial and error. And the Star Trek thing is, I think it was the Orville, this TV show, the Orville. I think that was kind of made just to explore how, to add that joke in, that old joke of you're getting killed and you're being reassembled every time, so the characters aren't the same characters. But like I'm more like, when it comes to like sci-fi technology like that, I for some reason I'm more attached to the organic style of it than the spaceship teleporting. I don't know whether anyone else is the same, but like I don't know why. I think it's more of a leaning towards the spirituality rather than the AI computer style thing. I have less of an interest in that type of area of storytelling.
Teleportation, terrible thing. No, the journey is important. That is the neurotypical saying, we would love to get there immediately and be able to keep working. And I'm like, no, I want the journey and to not work for a period of time before I have to do something again. So the journey is absolutely important. I don't want it to take too long. Planes are fine, but I love the idea of the physics of it taking you apart, putting you back together, because yeah, then I don't want to do it. No. That I feel like as well is the neurotypical versus neurodivergent. Oh yeah, take me apart, put me back together, I'll be the same person. No worries. Meaning like, but I want to remember that pen that I dropped somewhere, like 2 hours ago. I don't want to potentially lose something in my memory. And so no, I don't want teleportation.
Just when you're talking about it, I keep thinking of the Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Mike TV. Right? It's like we're testing this. You just eat this, and then you can just pop out right out of the TV, and all the things that can go wrong with being disassembled and reassembled. And things, and you see the little particles floating. It's like, what if somebody like sneezes in the middle of it, and then it's like, oops, sorry, there goes your arm and your
you're gone.
It essentially makes the characters into a product in a way that's like, I've never thought about that before. That's strange. That's also terrifying. That's like the Thomas the Tank Ghost train. It's getting to me. Help.
So, Patchree, I want to ask you the final question I have, and I've intentionally saved this for the end. Let's talk about space trains, the Artemis 2. In terms of recent history, I would say that it's not hyperbole to say the Artemis 2 was the most exciting transportation thing we have seen, like on a global scale, in a long time, or at least the one that generated the most awe from everyone. And certainly they went, I hate to say only to the moon, but we were just talking about Star Trek, and they're going many places. Do you think that the reinvigoration of space travel via Artemis 2 will lead to a reinvigoration of that same type of transportation coming up more frequently in books, movies, etc.?
That's an interesting one. It's always hard I'm probably the worst person to ask about trends because I don't always follow them. I mean, it takes me forever just to draft something. So it's like, I don't know, if my brain is right here now and it takes me 4 years to write it, will it still be popular 4 or 5 years down the line? But I think whenever we do have those moments of, innovation and this global bringing us all together in this moment, that you do want to see that reflected in the stories that we're hearing and the stories that we're reading, so that it's very possible. I think we're still always going to have sci-fi elements, and then you'll build upon the concept of the spaceship. I mean, look at our logo right here, right? We're always here in the spaceship. So how you tend to see those stories, I don't, I would love to think that because that's there and it's a very recent current event, that it's going to get people to read more stories revolving around that. But I don't know that it's going to translate because there's so much more going on in our, dumpster fire of a world, that there's so much more happening that I don't think people want to lean into that fantasy. Unfortunately, people, I don't know, we're in a crazy state that it's hard to sit there and try to, and it's only been a year-ish. But it's hard to imagine that something like that, as much as unifying as it should be, I think the powers that be, unfortunately, are trying to highlight the division more than the unification. And I don't see that, unfortunately, going away anytime soon. Because if those stories are written, they'll probably be stifled, and they'll probably be banned, and they'll probably be, said to go against whatever the moral high ground is right now. It doesn't fit unless you slap a big orange mask on it or something. Then I don't think it's, unfortunately, going to be pushed. Right? Probably not a popular opinion. But yeah, you would like for it to lead to more stories like that, but I don't think our current historical context is going to make that happen.
Has like, if you don't mind, has the collective impression switched? Has it gone from hope to cynicism now? Because going back to escape pods, it used to be about exploration, but now there's a heavy focus on abandonment when it comes to space travel and stories. Like, as much as I love it, that's the main plot of Interstellar. Even like Project Hail Mary touches upon it. It kind of tries to subvert the whole, you know, escaping from the planet while it's doomed type scenario. And I do think people were drawn to that, and I'm happy people did latch onto that, even though the author said it wasn't, there was no messages being written into it. I do think that's out of everyone's control. Um, so I do think that was kind of re-establishing hope in the same way, you know, superhero films are trying to do that now, where against all odds, everyone is trying to now re-establish just a hopeful takeaway from these stories. A lot of people are, and with this space travel thing, like, I get scared when I see, like, it's we can't really look at companies as companies anymore. They're just people, as in specific people who have egos so big that they've essentially put their own faces on the company, as you were saying, big orange mask. Like SpaceX with the um leader who shall not be named, the big block of ham man. He he had the idea of having a rocket that could be caught in midair, and it sounds stupid. It just sounds like a complete waste of money and time. And then you look at where the rocket platforms are based, and it's the Texas coastline, and they're not going to be able to fly when the tide comes in. So it turns out it wasn't an innovation just for fun or, to innovate itself. It was a necessity. And that kind of got to me a little bit because I was just thinking, you know, that's what people in the space, not NASA specifically, but that's the mission. That's what they're concentrating on. Like, because I do believe a lot of owners of, especially private space organizations, I do believe their mindset is escape. I don't think it's explore. And I don't really, I'm not a fan.
Really, it's the darkest times that tend to generate the most hopeful fiction because, frankly, you you got you want you want an escape. You want to think so. You know, comedies flourished in the 1930s, which was not a comedic time in American history, but Hollywood was churning them out because people didn't want to think about the economic doom, gloom, and march into a war that was happening. So you get a lot of really, I mean, this is where the tap to the musical start. I was just listening to NPR this morning about, Star Trek's coming up on its 60th or so, and talking about what it meant because it came out in a very chaotic, gloomy time when there was a lot of things going wrong. And here we are showing a spaceship that's flying around space, trying to do good. We can argue about their prime directive or not, but they're trying to do good with an integrated cast, and so on and so forth. And it was revolutionary for the time, and it was incredibly helpful for the time. And it didn't last. It only lasted 3 years as a TV series. And like, what would, how would that change anything? Except here we are, 60 years later, and we're holding phones that look like communicators. We're still talking about how to bring on this thing or that thing that they postulated. So I think you can put out hopeful fiction. I think there's an audience for it. I think people love it. And I'm hoping that every kid who watched Artemis 2 go up and splash down comes up with a hopeful story in the next 10 years that will delight me because I think it was an amazing moment in history to watch that crew go out and come down. And it's so much different than what we saw when you look at who was on that Artemis 2 than who was on Apollo. I mean, we have come so far, and it is so amazing. And props to NASA. It was a wonderful experience.
Only thing to say is I kind of thought 10 years ago that the coming together would be let's try and save the planet and climate things and stuff like that. We're still facing the same problems. It's much worse. We are passing all sorts of things that will definitely affect us for the next century, if not several. Um, the idea of Artemis and going to the moon, okay. I The idea of technology, and going to space in order to do better things. It feels like low Earth orbit, mid Earth orbit is where we should be putting our focus on that. I and The other thing is the escapism for sure. It does feel like a lot of the first pile of going to space things was about conquest. We all wanted to conquer back in the 60s and 70s and 40s and 50s. And so now, at least in our space novels, we're not trying to do that. But I really kind of hoped that focus would come down here in terms of coming together.
Yeah, I hope so too. But yeah, I think we've got a possibility as writers to at least be helpful about it. There's some interesting help bunk stuff being put out there, and it could include trains.
Yeah.
I'll bring it back to the.
All right. Well, I want to give each of our panelists a moment to just plug whatever they need to before we conclude. So we'll go around the horn. We'll start with Sean. Anything you would like to share where people can find you, whatever, before we conclude?
Yeah, check us out, Tomeworks Edits, online. We're an editing collective. We do a lot of events in Houston and in Dallas. And have our writers' lunch on YouTube every week on Thursdays at 1 p.m.
My website is called liamquane.com, and that's where all the information on my upcoming releases are. My next book will be out in 2026. The release date isn't concrete yet, but we are working on it, and it's a novella, so it's not a full novel. So if anyone's got a crap attention span like me, that'll be a helpful shift towards reading books if you don't already. And if you do, thank you for reading books. It's very important, I think. So yeah, that's me. And yeah, hallelujah. Yeah.
You can typically find me. I need to update my website, but it's simply patchree.jones.com. My next thing coming out is the short story inside the In the Name of the Flower anthology for Inked and Gray Press. I think that's going to come out later this year. And it is a sci-fi futuristic kind of story. So it's the first time I did one of those. Kind of interesting, fun take, and interweaving the themes of flowers into it was always a challenge. But I'm on Instagram. You can find me on most of my socials. It's Patchree Jones. With the exception of Twitter X, I'm still Tangent Points, and I'm always around on the boards of Write Hive. So it's my favorite time of year.
And last but not least, Rosemary.
Oh, hi. You can find all my socials and everything else listed at rosemaryjones.com, ROSEMARYJONES.com. And I will be putting up an article about my favorite terrain novels, including Around the World in 80 Days and some pictures of my Nellie Bly collection in the next couple of weeks. So check it out.
All right. And for the Write Hive conference, my name again is S. Morgan Burbank. I've been very pleased to be the moderator for this panel. For anyone who is watching this live when the actual event is going on, go look in Discord at the schedule as to what's going next. I don't know that schedule as of right now. If you're watching this in the future, tell us where the new trains are. Okay, I love you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.